Thank you. Lescan Corla and I rise to support the principle behind this legislation, because while many people are highlighting this issue today, Cahirley, I was the one 12 months ago during the first lockdown that was pressing this particular issue. And it wasn't just the private providers, but we had the University of Limerick on its own campus accommodation refusing to give students back their funds. And many landlords, including the University of Limerick at the time, turned their backs on students who had paid substantial deposits and upfront payments for accommodation. And sadly, this has been replicated again during the back end of last year and again into this year. And these students are being told that they're not getting their money back, even though they cannot utilise the accommodation either on or off campus because of the COVID-19 restrictions that are in place. Now, I've pointed out here on a number of occasions that the commercial private accommodation providers are not only availing of financial supports from the taxpayer, but also tax incentives for much of this accommodation. And these incentives need to be withdrawn forthwith for those providers that are unwilling to assist students. Now, Minister Harris has told me that in relation to the private rental market, while he's urging providers to be flexible in finding solutions given the particular circumstances as a result of COVID-19, he has no specific powers in this area. But the reality is that many of these accommodation providers acquired lands under licence from a public body, received land on the cheap from public bodies, or are currently getting tax refunds. In fact, there are approximately 200 providers at the moment receiving tax refunds. Now, the Minister for Finance, when I questioned him on this specific issue here last July, said that he couldn't do anything regarding tax reliefs that had been introduced previously. But we have, in the last 12 months, brought in emergency legislation that has restricted the liberty of every single citizen in this country because of the health emergency that we're dealing with. Now, surely if we can restrict the movement of individuals across this country because of a health emergency, we can also revise these tax incentives where landlords are not prepared to refund back to students the substantial deposits that they have received to date. And on top of that, many of these commercial landlords are receiving the pandemic unemployment payment, or their employees are availing of it. They're receiving or availing of the wage subsidy schemes, rate relief schemes and other incentives. And it is immoral that on one hand these private providers are ignoring the very genuine calls by students who cannot avail of accommodation, and yet on the other hand are taking the state incentives that are there. And you can, under emergency provisions, deal with this issue, and it needs to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. Two other things that I would ask that would be done as a matter of urgency. And the first one is that all of the third-level institutions in this country would provide clarity to students as to how their courses are going to be delivered from next September. Are they going to be delivered on a blended basis? Is it going to be possible for them to access these courses remotely so that they don't need to be paying substantial deposits today to secure accommodation if it's going to be the case that they are going to be availing of blended learning next September? And the universities themselves can provide that clarity, and third-level institutions now rather than waiting into the future. The other thing that should be done is that every single third-level institution in this country that, as part of their registration fee, is collecting funds from students towards sporting and recreational facilities, towards health facilities, etc., that element of the registration fee should be refunded immediately, and there should also be a reduction in the fees in light of the fact that students are accessing education online. Thank you.